What started as routine celebrity banter turned into television chaos when Jimmy Kimmel crossed a line that sent Kim Kardashian walking off set in fury, leaving audiences stunned and social media exploding. The studio lights dimmed as the familiar opening theme of Jimmy Kimmel Live echoed through the packed audience. Tonight's guest was none other than Kim Kardashian, arriving to promote her latest business venture while wearing a sleek black dress that commanded attention. The crowd erupted in applause as she gracefully walked across the stage, her signature smile masking what would soon become one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. Kimmel, known for his sometimes provocative interview style, greeted Kim with his usual theatrical enthusiasm. "Kim Kardashian, everybody! Looking absolutely stunning as always," he announced, gesturing toward his guest as she settled into the cream-colored chair beside his desk. The audience's energy was palpable, phones already recording what they assumed would be another entertaining celebrity interview. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy," Kim replied, her voice warm but professional. She had done this dance countless times before, navigating the delicate balance between promotion and personal boundaries that came with every talk show appearance. Her media training kicked in automatically as she prepared for the usual questions about family, business, and whatever controversy was currently trending about the Kardashian clan. The first few minutes proceeded exactly as expected. Kimmel asked about her shapewear line, her children, and her recent legal studies. Kim answered with practiced ease, occasionally laughing at his jokes while maintaining the polished composure that had made her a media powerhouse. The studio audience was eating it up, completely unaware that beneath the surface, Kimmel was building toward something much more sinister. "So, Kim," Kimmel said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that should have been a warning sign, "you've really transformed your image over the years. From reality TV star to businesswoman to law student, it's quite the evolution." His tone carried an undertone that made Kim's shoulders tense slightly, though she kept her smile intact. "I've always been focused on growth and learning," she responded diplomatically, sensing the shift in his energy, but hoping to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "Life is about evolving and challenging yourself," Kimmel nodded slowly, his fingers drumming against his desk, in a rhythm that seemed to match his growing anticipation. "Absolutely. And you've certainly overcome a lot to get where you are today. I mean, not everyone could turn what some might call a scandal into a billion-dollar empire." The words hung in the air like smoke, and several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Kim's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. "I prefer to focus on the positive aspects of my journey, Jimmy. There's so much exciting stuff happening with my brands and my family." But Kimmel wasn't done. He had tasted blood in the water, and like a shark, he circled closer. "Oh, absolutely. But you have to admit, without that initial, let's call it breakthrough moment, none of this might have happened, right?" His emphasis on certain words was deliberate, calculated to provoke a reaction while maintaining just enough plausible deniability. The studio fell eerily quiet. Even the camera operators seemed to sense that something was about to go very wrong. Kim's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, her years of media training warring with her natural instinct to defend herself. She knew exactly what he was referring to, and she knew he knew she knew. "Jimmy, I think we should talk about why I'm actually here tonight," she said, her voice remaining steady but carrying a new edge that hadn't been there moments before. "My new skincare line launches next week, and I'm really excited to share that with your audience." Kimmel chuckled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Come on, Kim. We're all adults here. I'm just saying, sometimes the best thing that can happen to someone is something they initially thought was the worst thing. You turned lemons into lemonade, as they say." He paused, letting his words sink in before delivering what he clearly thought would be his knockout punch. "After all, without that tape—" The words hit Kim like a physical blow. Her face went completely white, then flushed red with anger so intense that even the studio lights seemed to dim in comparison. The audience gasped collectively, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't scripted banter or playful roasting. This was character assassination broadcast live to millions. "Excuse me?" Kim's voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of calm that precedes a storm. She leaned forward in her chair, her entire posture shifting from relaxed celebrity to protective mother and businesswoman ready for war. "What did you just say?" Kimmel realized he had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, his ego pushed him further into dangerous territory. "Oh, come on, Kim. Everyone knows your origin story. I'm not saying anything that isn't already public knowledge. You parlayed that situation into fame, fortune, and a dynasty. It's actually pretty impressive when you think about it." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. He was treating her personal trauma like a business strategy, reducing her to nothing more than a calculated opportunist. The audience was no longer laughing or cheering. They were watching in horrified silence as their host systematically dismantled his guest's dignity on live television. "You have absolutely no right to bring up something that happened when I was barely an adult," Kim said, her voice rising with each word. "That was a violation of my privacy, and you're sitting here acting like it was some kind of career move. Do you have any idea how that affected me? How it affected my family?" Kimmel shrugged with theatrical nonchalance, clearly enjoying the chaos he had created. "Look, I'm not judging. Business is business. You took a bad situation and made it work for you. There's nothing wrong with that." He turned to the audience with a smirk. "Right, folks?" The crowd remained silent. Even his most loyal fans could sense that this had gone too far. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what was rapidly becoming a public relations nightmare for the show and its host. Kim stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a sound that echoed through the stunned studio. "You think this is funny? You think my trauma is entertainment for your audience?" Her voice was shaking with rage and hurt. "I came here as a professional courtesy, to promote my business and have a conversation. Instead, you ambushed me with the most painful period of my life." Kimmel finally seemed to realize the gravity of his mistake, but his response only made things worse. "Kim, sit down. You're overreacting. It was just a joke. Can't you take a joke?" The dismissive tone in his voice was the final straw. He had humiliated her, then tried to gaslight her into believing she was the problem. The studio erupted as Kim's fury reached its breaking point. "A joke?" Kim's voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade. "You think exploiting someone's trauma for cheap laughs is comedy? You think humiliating a guest on your show is professional?" Her hands were trembling with rage as she pointed directly at Kimmel. "This isn't humor, Jimmy. This is cruelty disguised as entertainment." The audience sat frozen, phones still recording but no longer out of excitement. They were witnessing the complete breakdown of what should have been a routine celebrity interview. Several people in the front row looked genuinely uncomfortable, shifting in their seats as they realized they were complicit in this public humiliation simply by being present. Kimmel's face had gone from smug confidence to panic as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. His show's producers were frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, but there was no graceful way out of the hole he had dug for himself. "Kim, please, let's just take a breath here. We can edit this out if you want. It's not that serious." "Not that serious?" Kim's voice rose to a level that made the microphones crackle. "You just reduced my entire career, my entire life's work, to a sex tape that was leaked without my consent when I was 22 years old. You sat there and suggested that I deliberately used my own violation as a stepping stone to success. How dare you?" The raw pain in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't manufactured drama or publicity theater. This was genuine anguish from someone who had spent decades trying to overcome a traumatic experience, only to have it thrown back in her face on live television by someone she had trusted. To treat her with basic human decency. Kimmel's attempts at damage control only made things worse. "Look, I didn't mean it like that. You're a strong woman, you overcame adversity. That's admirable. I was trying to compliment your resilience." His words sounded hollow and rehearsed, the desperate backpedaling of someone who knew he had destroyed his credibility in real time. "Don't you dare try to spin this now," Kim shot back, her voice steady despite her obvious emotional turmoil. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You planned this. You brought me on your show under false pretenses, waited until I was comfortable, then ambushed me with the most painful chapter of my life. For what? Ratings? Viral clips? Twitter engagement?" The accusation hung in the air like a thundercloud. Everyone in the studio knew she was right. This hadn't been an off-the-cuff comment or a joke that went too far. It had been a calculated attack designed to create controversy at her expense. The premeditated nature of it made Kimmel's behavior even more reprehensible. "You have 4 daughters, Jimmy," Kim continued, her voice breaking slightly. "How would you feel if someone did this to one of them? If they were violated, and then years later, someone used that violation to mock them on national television? Would you tell them it was just a joke? Would you tell them they were overreacting?" The personal nature of her attack hit its mark. Kimmel visibly flinched, his face growing pale as the implications of her words sank in. The audience began to murmur among themselves, and not in support of their host. The tide had completely turned, and everyone in the room could feel it. "That's different," Kimmel stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. "That's not... I mean, you're a public figure. It's different when you're famous." "No, it's not different," Kim exploded, her composure finally shattering completely. "Fame doesn't make you less human. Success doesn't erase trauma. Money doesn't heal the wounds of having your privacy violated and your dignity stripped away. You don't get to decide that my pain doesn't matter because I'm successful despite it." The studio was completely silent except for the sound of cameras, still rolling, and the faint hum of overhead lights. Even the production crew had stopped their usual bustling activity to watch the confrontation unfold. This was television history in the making, but not the kind anyone wanted to be associated with. Kim took a deep breath, visibly trying to regain her composure, but the damage was done. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears of rage and frustration. "I built my businesses through hard work, smart investments, and years of grinding. I earned my law degree through dedication and study. I raised my children with love and protection. None of that has anything to do with a tape that was leaked without my permission when I was barely out of college." Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, but Kim cut him off with a gesture that brooked no argument. "I'm not finished. You want to know what's really disgusting about this? You're not just attacking me. You're perpetuating the idea that women who've been victimized are somehow responsible for their own exploitation. You're teaching young girls that if something terrible happens to them, society will use it to define them forever." Her words carried the weight of someone who had spent years advocating for criminal justice reform and women's rights, someone who had transformed personal pain into a platform for positive change. The contrast between her dignity in this moment and Kimmel's juvenile cruelty was stark and undeniable. The host made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Kim, I'm sorry if I offended you. That wasn't my intention. Can we please just sit down and finish the interview like adults?" Kim looked at him with a mixture of disgust and pity that was more devastating than any screaming fit could have been. "Adults?" Kim's voice was quiet now, but it carried more power than all her previous shouting. "Adults don't ambush their guests with trauma for entertainment. Adults don't mock victims for cheap laughs. Adults take responsibility for their actions instead of making excuses." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering her final judgment. "You're not behaving like an adult, Jimmy. You're behaving like a bully who got caught." The silence that followed was deafening. Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, his usual quick wit completely abandoned. His face had gone from defensive to defeated as the reality of what he had done began to truly register. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was career suicide broadcast live to millions of viewers. Kim reached down and picked up her purse from beside her chair. Her movements, deliberate and controlled. "I came here tonight to talk about my skincare line, to share something positive with your audience. Instead, you chose to drag me through the mud for your own twisted entertainment." She straightened up, her posture regal despite everything that had just transpired. "You know what the real tragedy is, Jimmy. You had the opportunity to have a meaningful conversation with someone who has actually overcome adversity and built something incredible. You could have talked about criminal justice reform, about entrepreneurship, about motherhood, about any number of substantive topics. Instead, you chose cruelty." The audience remained silent, but their body language spoke volumes. Many were looking down at their phones, undoubtedly already sharing clips and commentary about what they had just witnessed. Others were shaking their heads in visible disappointment. The energy in the room had completely shifted from excitement to shame and secondhand embarrassment. Kim walked toward the front of the stage, but before leaving, she turned back to face both Kimmel and his audience one final time. "To everyone watching at home, especially young women who might be dealing with their own violations of privacy or dignity, you are not defined by the worst thing that happened to you. You are not responsible for other people's cruelty, and you never have to accept being treated as less than human for someone else's entertainment." Her words carried the authority of someone who had lived through public humiliation and emerged stronger. This wasn't just a celebrity having a meltdown. This was a survivor reclaiming her narrative and refusing to be diminished by someone else's need for controversy. Kimmel finally found his voice, but it was weak and desperate. "Kim, please don't. Leave like this. We can work this out. I'll apologize on air. We'll do a whole segment about it. Please." Kim paused at the edge of the stage, considering his plea for exactly 3 seconds before shaking her head. "Some things can't be fixed with an apology, Jimmy. Some lines, once crossed, change everything." Her voice was steady, final. "I hope your ratings were worth it." With that, she walked off the stage, her heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown to Kimmel's professional demise. The audience sat in stunned silence as the reality of what they had witnessed began to fully sink in. They had come expecting entertainment, and instead had become unwilling participants in a public destruction. Kimmel was left alone at his desk, the cameras still rolling, capturing every moment of his humiliation. His usual smooth recovery was nowhere to be found. Instead, he stammered through an awkward transition to commercial break, his voice cracking as he tried to maintain some semblance of professionalism. "We'll be right back, folks," he managed, but everyone knew nothing would ever be the same again. The damage was done, broadcast live and already spreading across social media like wildfire. Within minutes of Kim's exit, clips of the confrontation were trending on every platform. The hashtag #RespectKim began gaining traction, with users expressing outrage at Kimmel's behavior and support for Kim's powerful response. Comments poured in from celebrities, activists, and ordinary viewers, all condemning the host's unprofessional conduct. The next morning brought devastating news for Kimmel's show. Ratings had plummeted overnight, sponsors were pulling their support, and industry insiders were distancing themselves from the controversy. What had started as an attempt to create viral content had instead created a public relations nightmare that threatened to end his career. Kim, meanwhile, had handled the aftermath with characteristic grace. Her social media posts focused on thanking supporters and continuing to advocate for the causes she believed in. She didn't need to relitigate the confrontation. Her dignity during the interview had spoken louder than any follow-up statement could. The incident became a watershed moment in entertainment journalism, sparking widespread discussions about respect, professionalism, and the treatment of guests on talk shows. Industry standards were quietly revised, and other hosts took note of what happened when basic human decency was abandoned for the sake of controversy. As for Kimmel, he learned too late that some lines should never be crossed, no matter how desperate, the hunger for ratings. His attempt to humiliate a guest had instead revealed his own character, and the judgment was swift and unforgiving. The confrontation had indeed highlighted the importance of respect and professionalism in the entertainment industry by showing the